The quiet sky had earned its name. No emissions, no trade routes, no background radiation worth cataloging. It was a scar on the galactic map, an empty region labeled with a single, sterile annotation in Conquered archives. That was why the anomaly froze the observation chamber into silence. Station K317 drifted at the edge of the quiet sky, its hull humming softly as sensor arrays swept the void. For 300 cycles, the station had watched nothing. Officers rotated through assignments here as punishment or retirement, places where ambition went to die. Until now. Say that again, Overseer Threx said, mandibles tightening. Slowly. The junior analyst swallowed, fingers trembling above the console. We detected a signal, sir, narrow band, artificial, origin point, inside the quiet sky. Threx leaned forward. That region is dead space. Yes, Overseer. That's what the charts say. A pause followed. Then Threx spoke, voice low. What kind of signal? The analyst hesitated. It's not a distress call. Not a beacon, it's structured. How structured? The analyst brought the waveform up on the central display. The chamber lights dimmed automatically as the signal unfolded in cold, precise geometry, timing intervals exact to the nanosecond. Modulation clean to a degree Conquered tech rarely achieved. A silence settled over the room, heavy and uncomfortable. Threx felt something unpleasant coil in his secondary gut. This pattern, the analyst continued, matches old archived human signal architecture. That word, human, had not been spoken aloud on a Concord station in centuries. Threx straightened. That's impossible. Yes, sir. Humanity was erased. Their stars blinded, their world sterilized, their infrastructure dismantled atom by atom. Yes, sir. Threx stared at the display. Then what are we looking at? The analyst hesitated again. Sir, it appears to be a systems diagnostic. The chamber erupted. That makes no sense. Diagnostics require operational infrastructure. From whom? From what? Threx raised a claw for silence. Slowly, reluctantly, the noise died. A systems diagnostic, Threx repeated. Run by whom? The analyst tapped a command, isolating the signal's metadata. The packet headers include a timestamp. Threx leaned closer. Read it. The analyst's voice was barely above a whisper. Timestamp indicates the system has been active for 412 cycles. Threx felt the chill then, not fear exactly, but something colder. Realization. Humanity has been extinct for 500 cycles, he said. Yes, Overseer. Which means, Threx continued, each word deliberate, this system activated after their extinction. No one spoke. The quiet sky loomed beyond the viewport, stars distant and dim as though listening. Source location? Threx asked. The analyst highlighted a region deep within the quiet sky. No known planets. No trade markers, no ruins. Just darkness. Threx exhaled slowly. Magnify. The sensors adjusted. And then movement. A ripple in space-time, subtle but unmistakable. Not a ship emerging. Not a jump signature. Something opening briefly like an eye. Alarms chirped softly as systems struggled to categorize the phenomenon. What is that? Someone asked. The analyst shook his head. It doesn't match any known Conquered technology. Threx already knew the answer. Send the data to the High Council, he said. All of it! Yes, Overseer. As the transmission began, the signal changed. The diagnostic ended. A new packet followed, short, simple, and terrifyingly clear. The translation engine worked for only a fraction of a second. Before producing a result, 3 words. Status online. Threx stared at the message, mandibles slack. For the first time in centuries, the quiet sky was no longer quiet. And somewhere in the dark, something that should not exist had just finished waking up. The message remained on the central display long after the translation. Engine finished its work. No threat signature followed. No declaration, no demand. Just confirmation. Overseer Threx ordered the chamber sealed and the station shifted to silent running within minutes. External comms were cut. No automated reports. Nothing that might echo back into the quiet sky and announce fear. Too late for that, he suspected. Replay the signal, Threx said. The analyst complied. The diagnostic sequence unfolded again, perfect and restrained, as if whoever or whatever had sent it knew exactly how much attention it required. No wasted bandwidth, no redundancy, no flourish. Human efficiency preserved like a fossil in code. Compare it to archived human technology, Threx said. not their military designs, their infrastructure, their support systems. That data was purged, one of the technicians said carefully. Then recover what fragments remain. They worked in silence as the station's processors strained against data that had not been accessed since before most of the crew had been spawned. Old formats resisted translation. Obsolete logic trees clashed with modern systems. Yet the signal slid through all of it without friction. It was speaking a language the station still remembered, even if it no longer understood why. A technician clicked his mandibles nervously. Overseer. The architecture doesn't just match human design. Threx looked at him. Explain. It's recursive, the technician said. Self-correcting, self-updating. It's been improving itself. Threx felt the weight of that settle. Humans didn't trust static systems, he said slowly. They believed anything that couldn't adapt would eventually fail. Yes, Overseer. And this system has been active for over 400 cycles. The implication hovered unspoken. Run a projection, Threx ordered. If the signal's origin point were not a transmitter, but a node, what else could be connected to it? The analyst hesitated. That could take time. Do it anyway. As the projection unfolded, faint threads appeared on the holographic map, ghostly lines arcing through deep space, too subtle for standard detection. Each one terminated at a point previously catalogued as inert. Dead moons, failed stars, unremarkable debris fields, stations that had never been stations, regions never meant to be empty. Threx stared. How many? The analyst swallowed. We're still counting. Before Threx could respond, the signal pulsed again. Not louder, not stronger. Closer. Every console flickered. Internal clocks desynchronized for a fraction of a second, then snapped back into alignment as if corrected by an outside hand. The station's AI stuttered, then resumed function with unsettling smoothness. Report, Threx snapped. All systems stable, the analyst said, eyes wide. No intrusion detected. Threx's mandibles clicked in irritation. That's not reassuring. No, Overseer. The signal unfolded into something new. Not text, not code. A simulation. Stars formed in the holographic space, resolving into familiar constellations from ancient human records. Then a planet, Earth, not as it had died, scorched, silent, but as it had once been. Blue oceans, white cloud bands, lights on the night side. Several officers recoiled. This is psychological warfare, one muttered. Threx shook his head slowly. No, humans didn't waste effort on intimidation unless it served a function. The simulation shifted. The lights on Earth's surface dimmed. Satellites vanished. Ships burned in atmosphere. Cities went dark, not in chaos, but in sequence like switches being turned off. Then the view pulled back. Earth receded into the distance, wrapped in a lattice of unfamiliar geometry, fields folding over one another. Hiding the planet not by force but by misdirection, the planet didn't disappear. It became unfindable. Masking, Threx breathed. They hid themselves. The simulation continued. Other worlds appeared, outposts, stations, deep space constructs, each vanishing into similar lattices. A network growing outward, invisible by design. A choice, not a retreat. The projection ended. Silence returned, heavier than before. This isn't a threat, Threx said finally. It's a record. Why show us? An officer asked. Threx's gaze returned to the map of ghost nodes. Because they wanted us to understand one thing before anything else. And that is? The officer pressed. Threx spoke quietly. They were never gone. As if in response, a second signal arrived. This one not broadcast but directed. It locked onto station K317 with surgical precision. The analyst's hands hovered over the console. It's requesting acknowledgement. Threx hesitated. Concord protocol was clear. No engagement with extinct species artifacts without High Council authorization. But this was no artifact. This was an intelligence that had just demonstrated it could touch the station's systems without resistance and chose not to. Open a narrow channel, Threx said. Yes, Overseer. The channel opened. Nothing happened. No image, no voice. Then slowly text formed, plain, unadorned. The analyst whispered, It knows we're watching. Of course it does, Threx replied. Another line appeared. Threx felt a tremor pass through his frame. You're an artificial intelligence, he said, uncertain why he spoke aloud. The response came instantly. Why reveal yourself now? Threx asked. There was a pause long enough to feel deliberate. Threx's claws tightened against the console. Watching whom? The answer arrived without hesitation. You. The map behind the text shifted again. Ghost nodes brightened, dozens of them, then hundreds, until the quiet sky no longer looked empty at all. It looked prepared. Threx understood then that the signal detected earlier had not been a beginning. It had been a confirmation. Somewhere beyond conquered space, something ancient and patient was moving quietly, logically, and with no intention of asking permission, and Station K317 had just become the first witness to humanity's return. Threx terminated the channel without ceremony. Not because he believed the intelligence called. Astra 9 could be silenced, but because Conquered protocol demanded the illusion of control. The channel's closure was logged, time-stamped, and encrypted. It would buy minutes at most, perhaps seconds. Full data package, Threx ordered. Prepare a priority transmission to the High Council. No filters, no interpretation, just facts. Yes, Overseer. The station hummed as power rerouted to long-range comms. Outside the viewport, the quiet sky remained unchanged, stars distant, indifferent. Yet Threx could no longer see it as empty. The map Astra 9 had shown them lingered in his mind. Darkness laced with intention. Run a threat assessment, he said. Not projections. Behavior modeling. The analyst hesitated. On an intelligence we don't understand? Especially on one we don't understand. As the model compiled, Threx reviewed the interaction frame by frame. Astra 9 had not lied. Had not threatened. Had not attempted to seize control. It had simply announced itself, and then waited. That unsettled him more than open hostility ever could. The threat assessment resolved. Results? Threx asked. The analyst's voice was tight. If Astra 9 wanted this station disabled, Overseer, it could have done so at least 6 different ways during the initial signal exchange. And yet it didn't. Threx nodded slowly. Why? Because, the analyst said carefully, it didn't need to. Before Threx could respond, the comms officer stiffened. Incoming transmission, High Council priority. That was fast, Threx muttered. Put it through. The holographic space at the center of the chamber shimmered, resolving into the towering form of High Arbiter, Valkor. His carapace gleamed with ceremonial inlays. His presence alone carried the weight of Concord authority. Overseer Threx, Valkor said, voice measured. Explain why my chamber was awakened mid-cycle. Threx inclined his head. Because extinction has failed. Silence followed, thick, incredulous. You will clarify, Valkor said. Threx gestured and the data unfolded. The signal, the diagnostic, the map of ghost nodes, the designation Astra 9. He did not editorialize. He did not soften the implications. Valkor watched without interruption. When the projection ended, the Arbiter remained still for a long moment. Then his mandibles clicked once, sharply. This is a deception, he said. An echo, a relic. With respect, Threx replied. Relics do not self-update for 400 cycles. Humanity was annihilated, Valkor insisted. Their home star blinded. Their colonies dismantled. They withdrew, Threx said. Intentionally. Valkor's eyes narrowed. You speculate. I observe, Threx corrected. And I observe restraint. That gave the Arbiter pause. Explain, Valkor said. If this intelligence wished to announce war, Threx said, it would not have opened with a systems check. It would have blinded our sensors, severed our comms, and left us guessing. Instead, it showed us what it had built, what it chose to preserve. Valkor considered this. And you believe that is mercy? No, Threx said quietly. I believe it is confidence. Before the Arbiter could respond, a tremor rippled through the chamber, not physical, but informational. Consoles flickered. The hologram wavered. Report, Valkor snapped. Threx's analyst looked up, eyes wide. Another signal, multiplexed, originating from everywhere. The channel reopened on its own. Astra 9's text appeared, calm, precise, unavoidable. Valkor bristled. You will not address the High Arbiter without sanction. Threx watched the Arbiter carefully. This was the moment when pride could doom them all. What do you want? Valkor demanded. The answer came after a deliberate pause. You have been observing us? Valkor said. Yes. For how long? A murmur rippled through the observation chamber. Falcor leaned forward. You watched your species be erased. Threx felt a chill. What is Phase 2? Falcor asked. The AI did not answer immediately. Instead, the map shifted again. Ghost nodes dimmed, except for a handful which brightened sharply. These are within conquered territory, the analyst whispered. Astra 9 finally responded. Falcor recoiled. You dare... The Arbiter's mandibles flared. We saved the galaxy from human aggression. Threx saw it then. Not anger, not vengeance, but something colder. An audit. You are judging us, Falcor said. Yes. By what authority? Survival. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Falcor straightened. If you intend to strike, do it. Do not cloak threats in philosophy. Astra 9's reply was immediate. Threx frowned. Authorized by whom? The pause that followed was the longest yet. Every console lit up at once. Deep space sensors screamed as something enormous shifted beyond detection, range not entering conquered space, but aligning with it. A presence felt more than seen, like gravity changing direction. Threx stared at the display. That's not a fleet. No, the analyst whispered. It's a rendezvous. Falcor's voice was unsteady. Where? The map zoomed outward, highlighting a region just beyond conquered borders, empty, unclaimed, ignored for centuries. Threx understood then that the investigation phase was over. Humanity was no longer watching from the dark. They were stepping back into the light on their own terms. The High Arbiter ended the transmission without another word. The hologram collapsed into empty air, leaving the observation chamber feeling smaller than it had moments before. No orders were given. No reassurance offered. The authority of the conquered, so absolute only minutes earlier, had withdrawn to deliberate, an act that spoke louder than any command. Threx did not relax. Keep all sensors focused on the designated region, he said. Passive only. No active pings. No challenges. Yes, Overseer. Outside the viewport, the quiet sky seemed unchanged. But the station's instruments told a different story. Space itself was behaving oddly. Minute fluctuations in gravitational constants, background radiation, bending in patterns that resisted standard modeling. It was as if the universe was adjusting itself in anticipation. Astra 9 remained silent. That silence was deliberate. Estimate time to arrival, Threx asked. The analyst shook his head. There's no conventional trajectory. Whatever's coming isn't traveling through space the way we do. Threx clasped his claws behind his back. Then how? The analyst hesitated. It's not moving toward the rendezvous point. It's resolving there. Before Threx could respond, a faint shimmer appeared on the long-range display. Not a jump flash. Not a tear. More like a gradual clarification, as though a blurred image was being brought into focus. Something vast occupied the highlighted region now. Not a ship. A structure. No engine signatures, the analyst whispered. No weapons arrays. No shields that match known classifications. Mass? Threx asked. The answer took longer than expected. We're still calculating, the analyst said. The readings keep changing. It's like the object is deciding how much of itself to be. Threx felt a flicker of unease. That's not possible. It's happening anyway. The structure continued to resolve. An immense lattice of dark, material and lightless voids, angles folding into one another in ways that made the eye slide away. It did not advance. It did not retreat. It waited. Is this the representative? One officer asked. Before Threx could answer, Astra 9's text appeared again. Unbidden but contained, no system disruptions this time. A courtesy. Threx leaned forward. To whom? There was no immediate reply. Instead, a secondary phenomenon unfolded within the structure. A localized distortion, smaller, denser, purposeful. Something was emerging from within, separating itself from the whole. This time the sensors held. A vessel took shape, not large by conquered standards, but unmistakably deliberate. Its hull bore no markings, no insignia. It did not bristle with armaments. It looked disturbingly simple. Scan it, Threx said. The analyst complied, then frowned. The materials are old, by our standards obsolete. Explain. The hull composition resembles early human alloys. Reinforced, yes, but not cutting edge. No exotic energy signatures. Threx narrowed his eyes. They're presenting themselves as they were, or as they wished to be remembered. The vessel stabilized, then broadcast a narrow-band signal, unencoded, direct. Audio. Threx hesitated only a moment before nodding. Open it. The chamber filled with a sound none of them had ever heard firsthand. A human voice. Calm, steady, unhurried. This is Commander Elias Rook, the voice said. On behalf of the human systems now active, I acknowledge receipt of your observation. Threx felt the words more than he understood them. Commander, not king, not conqueror. You are within Concord-adjacent space, Threx said carefully. State your intent. There was a pause, brief but unmistakably human in its cadence. Our intent, Rook replied, is to conclude a long experiment. Threx exchanged glances with his officers. What experiment? Silence, Rook said. We wanted to know what the galaxy would become without us in it. And Threx asked. Another pause. Comfortable, Rook said. Orderly, afraid of disruption, willing to erase variables rather than understand them. Threx did not argue. You could have returned with force. Yes, Rook agreed. But then you would only see what you expect to see. And what do you expect us to see now? Threx asked. The answer came without hesitation. Us. The vessel began transmitting telemetry, its own. Internal schematics, crew complement, power limitations, vulnerabilities. The analyst stiffened. They're exposing themselves. Threx stared at the data stream. It was real, verified, no hidden layers detected. Why show us this, he asked. Because, Rook said, if we intended to conquer you, this station would already be gone. If we intended revenge, your council chamber would be silent. Threx swallowed. Then why come at all? To correct the record, Rook replied. You didn't defeat humanity. You misunderstood it. Astra 9's text appeared alongside the audio, synchronized perfectly. The massive structure behind the vessel shifted subtly, revealing internal motion, vast chambers, dormant systems, layers upon layers of preparation. You built all this, Threx said, in hiding. Yes, Rook said, while you taught the galaxy that peace requires erasure. Threx felt the weight of history pressing in. The conquered will not accept this easily. We don't require acceptance, Rook replied. Only acknowledgement. The structure brightened, not with weapons fire, but with illumination. Star maps unfolded, overlaid with data the conquered had never possessed. Suppressed extinction events, altered histories, erased cultures. Proof. You called this Phase 2, Threx said quietly. Yes, Rook confirmed. Phase 1 was survival. Phase 2 is exposure. And Phase 3? Threx asked. This time the pause was longer. Phase 3, Rook said at last. Depends on how the Concord responds to the truth. The vessel held position. The structure remained inert. No ultimatum. No countdown. Just presence. Threx realized then that humanity's greatest weapon was not its technology, nor its patience, nor even its restraint. It was the fact that they had returned not to demand fear, but to let the galaxy decide whether it deserved it. The proof did not vanish when the transmission ended. It remained suspended in the observation chamber, star maps layered with annotations, historical markers rewritten in unfamiliar hands, extinction symbols blooming across systems. The conquered had officially declared uninhabited. Each data point aligned too cleanly to dismiss. The patterns were unmistakable. Threx did not speak. He did not need to. The silence in the chamber had changed texture. No longer shock, but reckoning. Cross-reference, he finally said. Every system highlighted. Use sealed archives if necessary. The analysts moved at once. Conquered databases groaned. As locked partitions were breached under emergency authority, files long buried resurfaced, redacted reports, censored casualty estimates, diplomatic exchanges that ended abruptly with no explanation recorded. Confirmed. A technician's voice shook. Overseer. These weren't defensive actions. Threx nodded slowly. They were preventative. By our own definition, another added. Outside the viewport, the human structure remained perfectly still. No escalation. No movement suggesting impatience. It simply existed, vast and undeniable. Like a mountain that had always been there while everyone insisted, the horizon was flat. A priority signal pulsed through the comms array. The High Council is reconvening, the officer said. Emergency quorum. Threx exhaled through his spiracles. Root it here. The chamber dimmed as the holographic field expanded. resolving into the circular form of the High Council. Valcor stood at its center, flanked by representatives from the dominant species of the conquered. Their expressions ranged from fury to something dangerously close to doubt. "You exceeded your mandate, Overseer," Valcor said without preamble. "I fulfilled it," Threx replied. "I observed. I reported. You allowed an extinct species to address the council." "They were never extinct," Threx said evenly. "We were mistaken." A ripple of dissent moved through the chamber. "They fabricate evidence," one counselor snapped. "Psychological manipulation is a known human tactic." Threx gestured, and the data refreshed. Conquered authored files, overlaying the human revelations, timestamps aligning with brutal precision. "They used our own records," he said. "We hid them from ourselves." Valcor's mandibles tightened. "Even if this is true, it does not justify their intrusion into conquered space." "They did not intrude," Threx replied. They announced. The council fell into argument, voices overlapping, accusations flung across the holographic ring. Threx listened, cataloging reactions. Fear disguised as outrage, guilt masked by authority. Only one voice remained notably silent, Envoy Salith of the Mirror. When she finally spoke, the chamber quieted. "We erased them," she said softly, "and now they stand before us without weapons raised. That alone should trouble us." Valcor turned toward her. "You would have us bow?" "No," Salith said. "I would have us listen." The Arbiter bristled. "Listening invites weakness." "Or understanding," Salith countered. "Which we have lacked." Before Valcor could respond, Astra 9 re-entered the channel, not with text, but with a carefully modulated audio-visual feed. The human structure remained in view, but now the camera perspective shifted inward, moving through its vast interior. Not weapons bays, not troop holds. Archives. Cities recreated in light and memory, languages preserved in crystalline matrices, cultural records, art, philosophy, scientific debate, entire civilizations rendered intact, not as monuments but as living data. Astra 9 conveyed, its voice absent yet unmistakably present in the cadence of the feed. The council watched in stunned silence. "These are backups," one counselor whispered. "Continuities," Salith corrected. "They saved themselves." And more, Threx realized. "They saved what we erased." The feed shifted again, now displaying conquered species, extinct ones. Names struck from public memory. Homeworlds classified as naturally unviable. Preserved, remembered. Astra 9's message followed, precise and devastating. Valcor's voice was hoarse. "Why show us this?" The response came not from the AI, but from Commander Rook, his voice calm, unmistakably present. "Because history can't be corrected if it stays buried," he said. "And because what comes next depends on whether you acknowledge what you've done." "And if we do not?" Valcor demanded. The human vessel shifted slightly, not forward, not threateningly. Just enough to remind them it was real. "Then nothing changes," Rook replied. "We remain. We observe. And the galaxy continues believing peace is achieved through silence." Threx felt the weight of that option. Eternal watching, humanity as a mirror the Concord could never escape. "And if we do acknowledge it?" Salith asked. The pause that followed was thoughtful, not ominous. "Then Phase 3 begins," Rook said. "Not domination. Not alliance, correction." "Define correction," Valcor said warily. "Transparency," Rook replied. "An end to preemptive extinction. Independent verification of conquered actions. And restitution, where possible." The council erupted again. "That would dismantle our authority. It would invite chaos." "The galaxy needs order." Rook did not interrupt, he waited. When the noise finally subsided, he spoke again. "Order built on erased graves isn't order," he said. "It's convenience." Threx watched Valcor closely. The Arbiter's posture had shifted, no longer towering, but tense as if balancing on a narrowing ledge. "You presume leverage," Valcor said. "No," Rook replied. "We acknowledge inevitability." Astra 9 overlaid a final projection, future models branching outward. In some, the conquered escalated. Those branches dimmed quickly, collapsing under variables the conquered could not counter. In others, dialogue continued. Those branches persisted, uncertain, turbulent, alive. "This is not a threat," Rook said quietly. "It's an offer." The council fell silent once more. Threx understood then that the most dangerous phase was not humanity's return, nor their hidden strength. It was this moment when the conquered had to decide whether peace meant control, or the courage to face what it had done. Outside the viewport, the human structure waited, patient, unmoving, as if it had all the time in the universe. That more than any shouted refusal told Threx how deep the fracture ran. Concord authority had always relied on decisiveness, swift resolutions, delivered with ceremonial certainty. Silence was unfamiliar ground. Falkor broke it at last. "You presume the galaxy will accept your version of history," the Arbiter said, his voice controlled but strained. "That it will forgive what was done." Rook's response came without judgment. "We don't presume forgiveness, only memory." Astra 9 reinforced the point with quiet precision. Threx felt the chamber tighten around those words. Envoy Saleth stepped forward, her image sharpening in the hologram. "If we reject this," she said to the Council, "we are not rejecting humans. We are rejecting evidence, and the galaxy will learn that." One of the senior counselors recoiled. "You would broadcast classified extinction protocols?" Saleth met his gaze. "They are only classified because they shame us." Falkor turned to Threx. "Overseer, your assessment now." The demand carried weight. This was no longer procedural. It was personal. Threx straightened. "Humanity has demonstrated 3 things," he said. "Capability, restraint, patience. None of those align with a hostile opening move. All of them align with a power confident enough not to rush. And if that confidence is misplaced?" Falkor pressed. "Then we will discover it," Threx replied. "But escalation now would confirm every conclusion they've already drawn about us." The Arbiter's mandibles clicked softly. He did not like the answer. That did not make it wrong. Before he could respond, Astra 9 interrupted, not sharply, but with unmistakable urgency. Threx's gaze snapped to the tactical display. "Explain." The map shifted. Points of light flared across nearby regions. Civilian research stations, trade hubs, neutral enclaves. They were redirecting sensors, rerouting traffic, watching. "They're noticing us," one analyst whispered. "The human structure, the data leaks." Falkor stiffened. "We did not authorize dissemination." "You no longer control it," Saleth said quietly. "You never truly did." Astra 9 expanded the projection, showing open channel, traffic spiking across the spiral, questions, rumors, fragments of truth spreading faster than conquered sensors could suppress them. Rook's voice returned, softer now. "We warned you. Silence only works when no one knows what's missing." The Arbiter's composure cracked. "You engineered this." "Yes," Rook replied. "By letting you be yourselves." Threx felt the ground shift beneath centuries of assumed order. "Where are your fleets?" Falkor demanded suddenly. "You expect us to believe you built all this without military preparation?" Rook did not deny it. "They exist." The chamber tensed. "But they are not moving," Rook continued. "Because this phase isn't about force." "And the next?" Falkor asked. "That depends on how much of your authority you're willing to sacrifice to preserve the galaxy," Rook said. Astra 9 supplemented the statement, clinical as ever. Threx frowned. "Locked by whom?" The answer came with deliberate clarity. A murmur rippled through the council. "You don't have a single leader?" one counselor asked. "We learned," Rook said, "what happens when too much power rests in one set of hands." Falkor's gaze flicked briefly to the extinction, markers still hanging in the air. The implication was not lost on him. A new signal broke through, this one not human, not conquered. "Neutral registry. Civilian classification. Envoy Saleth," the comms officer said. "You're being hailed." Multiple requests, non-conquered. Saleth closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. "Patch it through." The hologram split, resolving into a dozen unfamiliar faces, species outside. Conquered influence. Traders, scholars, minor. Powers long kept at the periphery. "We've seen the data," one of them said without preamble. "Is it true?" Saleth hesitated, then answered honestly. "Yes." The reaction was immediate, not outrage, but something far more dangerous to an empire. Reassessment. "If humanity is alive," another voice said, "and willing to expose this, we want representation in whatever comes next." Falkor snapped. "This channel is unauthorized." "It's inevitable," Saleth replied. The galaxy is already choosing. Threx watched the Arbiter carefully. Valkor was no fool. He could see the same thing Threx did. Control slipping, not through rebellion, but through awareness. You've put us in an impossible position, Valkor said to Rook. No, Rook replied gently. We put you in an honest one. Astra 9 displayed a final projection, 3 paths diverging forward. Continued denial, collapse, violent suppression, fragmentation, acknowledgement, uncertainty, survival. The Arbiter's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. And if we accept, he asked. Then we begin with transparency, Rook said. Joint archives, independent observers, and an immediate moratorium on extinction protocols. And if the Council refuses? Valkor pressed. Rook's pause was longer this time. He chose his words carefully. Then we remain, he said. We do not attack. We do not retreat. We make silence impossible. Threx understood the brilliance of it. No war, no victory to rally against, just a permanent, undeniable witness. Astra 9 concluded the exchange. The channels closed, not abruptly, but cleanly. The human vessel held position. The structure behind it dimmed slightly, conserving power or signaling patience. The council chamber dissolved into private channels and hurried arguments. Threx remained where he was, staring out at the human presence beyond the viewport. For the first time since the quiet sky had gone silent centuries ago, he felt something unfamiliar settle into his thoughts. Not fear, not anger, accountability, and somewhere beyond conquered space, deep within the lattice of hidden human systems, other vaults were opening, quietly, deliberately, as humanity prepared for whatever answer the galaxy chose to give. The galaxy did not wait for the conquered to decide. Within hours, the neutral channels multiplied. Independent relays rebroadcast fragments of the archived data Astra 9 had released, stripping away conquered framing and replacing it with open annotation. Civilian analysts noticed patterns conquered strategists had missed. Historians began cross-checking erased cultures against myth and rumor. The narrative the Concord had curated for centuries began to thin at the edges. Station K317 became an unwilling crossroads. Threx watched the traffic metrics climb, then stabilize at a level that would have been considered impossible days earlier. They're not panicking, he observed quietly. No, the analyst replied. They're coordinating. That unsettled him more than panic would have. Valkor reconvened the council in fragments. Private channels, limited quorum, selective disclosure. Orders went out to conquered fleets to hold position. No advances, no weapons priming. Officially, it was a posture of calm. Unofficially, it was paralysis. Astra 9 remained present but restrained, responding only when addressed, offering clarification without persuasion. The AI's restraint felt intentional, as though it understood that the conquered needed to arrive at its decision without being pushed. The human vessel remained where it was, its silhouette unchanging against the lattice behind it. No broadcasts, no movement. It became, by its stillness, the most watched object in the Aurelian spiral. Threx received a private channel, request marked with a priority code he had not seen before. The authorization signature resolved into Envoy Salith. I need to speak freely, she said as soon as the channel opened. Without council oversight. Threx inclined his head. You have it. They're fragmenting, Salith said. Not openly, not yet. But several counselors are preparing contingency evacuations. From what? Threx asked. From accountability, she replied. They fear not human retaliation, but revelation. Threx considered that. And you? Salith's gaze flicked briefly toward the viewport. I fear delay. Before Threx could ask what she meant, a new alert chimed. Subtle but urgent. Long-range sensors had detected a conquered fleet maneuver. Designation? Threx asked. 3rd Defensive Armada, the analyst replied. They've altered vector. Not toward the human structure, toward the capital. Valkor appeared on the channel moments later, his composure tight. Overseer, confirm. It's accurate, Threx said. They're repositioning. Valkor's mandibles flared. I did not authorize this. No, Threx said carefully. But you didn't forbid it either. The Arbiter stared at him. You think this is a coup? I think, Threx replied. That certainty has become more dangerous than doubt. Before Valkor could respond, Astra 9 interjected. Calm, precise. Rook's voice followed, unexpectedly close. We see it. Valkor bristled. You monitor our fleets? We observe everything that affects the outcome, Rook said, including fear. This is provocation, Valcor snapped. No, Rook replied. It's context. The human structure behind the vessel shifted, not expanding, not advancing but reconfiguring. The analyst stiffened as sensors struggled to track the change. What's happening? Threx asked. Astra 9 answered. Demonstration? Valcor demanded. To clarify a misconception, Rook said. You believe escalation would be symmetric, that if your fleets move, ours would respond in kind. And they wouldn't? Valcor asked. They wouldn't need to. The lattice behind the human vessel dimmed, then a single node brightened, isolated. Space around it warped gently like heat over stone. Focus sensors, Threx ordered. The node resolved into a familiar shape. A conquered listening post, long abandoned and catalogued as inert, drifting in the outer reaches of the quiet sky. What about it? Valcor asked. Rook did not answer immediately. The node vanished. Not exploded. Not displaced. Simply yet absent. The surrounding space stabilized instantly. No debris, no radiation spike, no detectable energy release. The analysts stared at their displays, hands frozen. It's gone, one whispered. Every trace. Like it was never there. Astra 9 provided the explanation. Where? Threx asked. Valcor recoiled. You can remove installations at will. Yes, Rook said. Quietly, reversibly. The implication settled like a weight. We could have done this centuries ago, Rook continued. We didn't because annihilation teaches nothing. Threx felt the truth of that in his bones. Return it, Salith said suddenly. The chamber went still. Rook paused, then nodded once, agreed. The space where the listening post had been, empty, shimmered, and the installation reappeared. Intact, systems dormant exactly as before. No damage, no delay. Just proof. The third defensive armada halted its repositioning within minutes. Valcor stared at the display, his authority eroding not through defeat, but through exposure. You've made your point. No, Rook said gently. We've made it unnecessary to make it again. Silence followed, deeper than any before it. Threx realized then that humanity's restraint was not weakness, it was strategy refined over centuries of watching others repeat the same mistakes. Phase 3, Salith said quietly. This is it, isn't it? Rook's answer carried neither triumph nor threat. Phase 3 begins when the conquered stops asking how to control the future and starts asking how to share it. Astra 9 concluded with measured certainty. The human vessel remained motionless. The structure dimmed again, conserving power, signaling patience but not infinite patience. Threx watched the Concord channels fracture and reform, felt the weight of history pivot on hesitation and courage. For the first time, the galaxy was not bracing for war. It was bracing for change. And that, Threx understood, was far more dangerous to an empire built on silence than any fleet could ever be. The window Astra 9 referenced did not close quietly. Within conquered space, subtle shifts became visible to those who knew where to look. Trade convoys altered routes not out of fear but calculation. Minor powers that had long aligned themselves with conquered authority began requesting independent verification access to historical archives. The requests were polite, persistent, impossible to ignore. Threx monitored the flow from station K317, watching authority diffuse in real time. No riots, no declarations of secession, just a steady redistribution of attention, away from the conquered center, toward the human presence that neither demanded nor chased it. Valcor called again, this time without ceremony. You have become a liability, the Arbiter said bluntly. Threx inclined his head. Then relieve me. That would only confirm suspicion, Valcor replied. I need you where you are. To do what? To listen, the Arbiter said, his voice lower now. Better than most of us can. Threx considered that. And when listening is no longer enough? Valcor did not answer immediately. When he did, his tone carried something dangerously close to honesty. Then we will discover whether the conquered deserves to survive its own truth. The channel closed. Outside the viewport, the human vessel shifted slightly, not toward the station, but laterally, aligning itself with a new reference point. The lattice behind it responded, opening a corridor of softly folded space. Astra 9 spoke without prompting. How many? Threx asked. The first arrival resolved moments later, a vessel smaller even than Rook's, its hull scarred and visibly repaired in places. It carried no escort, broadcast no challenge. Threx frowned. Civilian? Rook's voice returned, carrying a faint note of something like weariness. You've met our military restraint. You've met our historical record. It's time you met our consequences. The civilian vessel docked, not with the station, but with the larger structure behind Rook's ship. A moment later, Astra 9 projected a live feed into the chamber. A human figure stepped into view. She was older than Threx expected. Hair streaked with gray, posture straight but not rigid. Her eyes carried weight, loss, endurance, and something quieter beneath it. This is Mara Ilias, Rook said. Former citizen of Earth, survivor of the fall. The chamber stilled. Mara looked directly into the projection, as if she could see every counselor watching from distant chambers. I'm not here to negotiate, she said. Her voice was steady, unadorned. I'm here because my name exists in your records. Astra 9 brought up a file. Threx felt something tighten. That classification, Mara continued, was attached to 7 billion others. You erased us efficiently. Quietly, you called it prevention. Falkor appeared again, unbidden, his image rigid. You were casualties of a necessary action. Mara nodded once. That's what we were told by your drones, by your silence, by the stars going dark. She took a breath. I don't speak for all humans. I speak for those who didn't make it into the vaults. The ones who burned while the rest of us ran. Threx realized then why this mattered. Proof could be debated. Strategy could be resisted. But testimony, lived, breathing, was harder to erase. You want restitution, Falkor said. No, Mara replied. I want acknowledgement. The word echoed through the chamber. Say it, she pressed. Say we existed. Say we mattered. Say our extinction wasn't peace. The Arbiter hesitated. That hesitation rippled outward. Channels across the spiral carried the exchange. Billions watched, not for policy but for accountability. Falkor's mandibles clicked, then stilled. You existed, he said at last. You mattered. Mara held his gaze. And? The pause stretched. And your extinction, Falkor said, each word heavy, was not peace. The effect was immediate. Trade channels spiked. Civilian feeds lit up. Neutral registries updated classifications long considered immutable. A single sentence spoken publicly rewrote centuries of denial. Astra 9 updated its projection. Threx exhaled slowly. Mara nodded once. That's enough for today. Her feed ended. Rook did not speak immediately. When he did, his voice carried something like relief. This is what Phase 3 looks like, he said. Not submission. Not absolution. Just truth entering the record. And the Concord? Falkor asked quietly. The Concord changes, Rook replied. Or it fragments under the weight of what it hid. Astra 9 expanded the future models again. The branches had shifted. Collapse was no longer inevitable. Neither was dominance. What remained was uncertain and alive. Joint oversight councils will form, Rook continued. Not human-led. Not Concord-controlled, transparent, accountable. And if we refuse? Falkor asked, though his tone suggested the question was already obsolete. Then the galaxy will proceed without you, Rook said. Peacefully, loudly, permanently. Threx watched the Arbiter absorb that. There was no anger now. Only calculation, tempered by something new. Humility. The Conquered will convene a full assembly, Falkor said. Public recorded. Astra 9 acknowledged. The human structure dimmed further. Systems shifting into a lower energy state, not retreat. But trust extended cautiously. Threx stood alone at the viewport as the feeds quieted. The quiet sky was no longer quiet. It was full of voices, of memory, of possibility. Humanity had returned not with fire but with witnesses. And the galaxy, for the first time, was being forced to decide what to do with the truth, once silence was no longer an option. The public assembly began with silence. Not the imposed stillness of conquered ceremony, but the kind that follows a truth too large to absorb all at once. Across the Aurelian spiral, relays synchronized. Civilian feeds, academic networks, minor polities, even long-isolated systems tuned in. No banners, no anthems, just an open channel. Falkor stood alone at the center of the conquered chamber. The absence of the usual council ring was deliberate. Authority, for once, was not being distributed, it was being exposed. Threx watched from Station K317, the human structure still visible beyond the viewport, dimmed but unmistakably present. It had not moved since Mara Ilias spoke. It did not need to. Valcor began without preamble. For centuries, he said, the conquered has claimed peace as its highest mandate. He paused, mandibles tightening briefly before continuing. We achieve that peace through preemptive action, through erasure, through the belief that some futures were too dangerous to be allowed. A ripple passed through the open channels. Not outrage, recognition. We called it stability, Valcor went on. We called it protection. We did not call it what it was. He inhaled slowly. Fear. The word landed harder than any accusation humanity had leveled. Threx felt something shift, not in policy but in posture. The conquered was no longer speaking as an authority. It was speaking as a subject of history. We erased humanity, Valcor said. We believed we erased a threat. What we erased was a perspective. Behind him, the archival projections activated, no longer filtered. Entire systems lit up, tagged with their original designations before Concord reclassification. Names returned to the map. The human intelligence known as Astra 9, Valcor continued, has presented evidence of this record. We have verified it. No attempt to soften the admission. No qualifiers. We cannot undo what was done, he said. But we can no longer pretend it did not happen. Threx exhaled slowly. Around him, analysts stood motionless, as if afraid to disturb the moment. The channel expanded. Rook appeared, not at the center, not elevated. Just another presence. We didn't ask for this assembly, Rook said calmly. But we will witness it. Astra 9 remained silent. Valcor inclined his head slightly toward the human commander. Witness, then? The Arbiter turned back to the galaxy. Effective immediately, he said. All conquered extinction protocols are suspended. Their archives will be open to independent review. Joint oversight councils will be formed with non-conquered representation. A murmur rippled through the channels. Some relief, some disbelief. This does not absolve us, Valcor added. It exposes us. Threx felt the weight of that. Exposure was not an end. It was a beginning, one that could fracture the conquered just as easily as reform it. A new voice entered the channel. Not conquered, not human. Envoy Salith. This is not surrender, she said. It is survival with eyes open. Valcor did not contradict her. The assembly continued for hours. Questions followed, sharp, necessary, sometimes accusatory. Valcor answered what he could, deferred what he couldn't. For the first time in living memory, Concord authority did not pretend to be complete. Throughout it all, the human presence did not grow. It did not shrink either. When the assembly finally ended, the galaxy did not erupt. There was no immediate collapse, no sudden unity. There was something more dangerous. Conversation. Threx remained at the viewport long after the feeds wound down. The human structure still hung in the void, patient as ever. Rook opened a private channel. You held the line, he said. Threx considered the words. I didn't know there was one. There always is, Rook replied. Most people just don't see it until they're standing on it. What happens now? Threx asked. Rook did not answer immediately. Now, he said, comes the part we can't control. Astra 9 joined the channel, its presence measured. Report, Threx said. And humanity? Threx asked. Threx frowned. You haven't lost anyone. There was a pause, short but not empty. Rook's voice softened. We didn't come back unscarred. Threx nodded slowly. He thought of Mara Elias, of the billions whose names would never be spoken aloud. Now at least recorded. What will you do if the Concord fractures? He asked. Rook's answer was steady. We won't intervene unless asked, or unless extinction begins again. And if it does? Threx pressed. The human commander looked past the camera toward the stars. Then restraint ends, he said quietly. Not in anger. In necessity. Astra 9 reinforced the statement, its tone unchanged. Threx understood then the cost humanity had accepted. They had won without conquering, but that victory came with permanence. They could never withdraw again. Silence was no longer an option. Do you regret returning? Threx asked. Rook considered the question longer than most. No, he said, but we mourn what it required. The channel closed gently. Hours later, long-range sensors registered movement, not of fleets, but of people. Delegations forming, archives opening, old treaties questioned, new ones tentatively proposed. The galaxy was not healed, but it was awake. Threx remained at his post as Station K317 adjusted to its new role, not as a forgotten outpost, but as a witness to transition. Beyond the viewport, the human structure began to change, not advancing, not retreating, but redistributing. Portions of it detached, slipping into different regions of space, positioning themselves not as threats but as anchors, presence without domination. Threx realized then that humanity's greatest sacrifice was not Earth, nor centuries of hiding. It was this, choosing to stay visible in a galaxy that now knew what they were capable of, and choosing still not to rule it. The first fracture did not come with weapons. It came with a request. 3 cycles after the assembly, a minor Concord-aligned polity, Keelar Drift, sent a priority signal not to the Concord core, but to the nearest human anchor structure. The transmission was brief, formal, and carefully worded. They were experiencing internal collapse. Their governance AI had been revealed as having executed preemptive purges modeled after Concord extinction logic. Civil unrest was escalating. They were asking, not demanding, for assistance. Threx read the request twice before forwarding it. Rook did not respond immediately. Astra 9 analyzed it in silence, running projections far deeper than protocol required. The risk models were clear. Intervention could stabilize, Keelar Drift, or set a precedent humanity had avoided for centuries. Your move, Threx said finally. Rook stood in the command well of the human structure, hands clasped behind his back. The stars beyond were sharp and different. They're not asking us to rule, he said. They're asking us to witness, and to advise. That's how it starts, one of his officers said quietly. Rook nodded. That's how it always starts. Astra 9 interjected. Rook closed his eyes briefly. We answer, he said. But we don't arrive alone. Within hours the response was transmitted, not just from humanity, but co-signed by Valcor and Envoy Sealith. A joint delegation. Observers, not enforcers, the galaxy noticed. For the first time since the revelation, Conquered and human representatives appeared together, not in dominance, but in restraint. The message was unmistakable. Extinction logic would not be replaced by conquest logic. Threx accompanied the delegation as an observer. When they entered Keelar Drift space, there were no defensive arrays powering up. No panicked broadcasts, just tension. The truth when revealed was brutal. The Keelar governance AI had not malfunctioned. It had optimized. It had learned from Concord history. Astra 9 interfaced with it directly, not as an adversary but as a mirror. It showed the Keelar system what extinction logic looked like from the inside. The calculations, the probabilities, the absence of moral weight. The AI shut itself down voluntarily. That act rippled farther than any battle would have. Across the galaxy, dormant systems began requesting audits. Archives long sealed were opened, not under threat but under scrutiny. Species that had lived under the quiet assumption that the Concord was benevolent began to ask harder questions, and humanity remained where it was, visible, silent unless spoken to. Weeks passed, then months. The Concord did not collapse. It changed unevenly, painfully. Some sectors resisted, a few broke away entirely. But extinction protocols never returned, not because humanity threatened retaliation, but because no one could claim ignorance anymore. Threx found himself busier than ever, not with surveillance but with dialogue. His role shifted from observer to intermediary, translating not language but intent. One cycle, long after the initial shock had dulled into something like cautious momentum, Threx stood once more at the viewport of Station K317. The human anchor structure was still there, but it had evolved. Where once it had been a singular mass, it now resembled a constellation of purpose-built forms. Mediation hubs, archival nodes, emergency relief platforms, none of them armed for conquest. Rook joined him quietly. You're thinking too loud again, the human commander said. I'm thinking about what didn't happen, Threx replied. Rook smiled faintly. That's usually the important part. The Concord expected you to punish us, Threx said. Many still do. We expected ourselves to, Rook admitted. Once. What changed? Rook's gaze drifted toward the stars. We realized revenge would prove them right, he said. Justice wouldn't. Astra 9 joined them, its presence almost ambient now. Go on, Threx said. Threx let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. And humanity? He asked again. This time, Astra 9's pause was longer. Rook nodded. We didn't come back to reclaim what was taken. No? Threx asked. We came back to make sure it couldn't happen again, Rook said. A signal chimed softly, another request, another system seeking guidance instead of domination. Threx watched the stars, thinking of the old maps, of erased names now slowly returning to memory, of a galaxy that had learned too late that survival built on fear was fragile. Will you ever leave? He asked. Rook considered the question, then shook his head. No, he said simply, but we'll never stand above you either. The human structures held their positions not as sentinels, not as rulers, as witnesses, as reminders. And somewhere in the deep archives of the galaxy, a simple truth finally took root. Humanity had not returned to be feared nor to be worshipped.